Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Adapt or Die. By now is the time to build an agile content strategy. This webinar will be presented by Ryan Walton. He's the Director of User Experience here at eZdia, and Padmini Murthy, which is me. I'm the Director of Marketing at eZdia here, driving all marketing initiatives. Just to go over a few housekeeping items, if you have any questions, please feel free to pitch them over to us and we'll be happy to take them at the end of the session. Um, if there are any questions that we would like to refer to our specialists we will definitely do that and get back to you. We are also recording this session, so for those who have registered and are not able to attend for some reason, we will be posting a link of this webinar on our website shortly after the session. We will also be conducting polls at the end of every session here, and we would like all of you guys to participate. So going back to the webinar now, here's what we plan to cover here. So we'll first introduce eZdia, and then of course tell you a little bit about the speakers, that's Ryan and me. We will also talk about the state of the enterprise content today. How does enterprise content market look like, and what are the immediate challenges in managing this content? And what are some of the key best practices that we've learned as a content company um, in implementing some of these through our content platform for different enterprise customers. And we will mainly focus on retail because that's where we've seen a lot of need for content, especially now with the marketplaces coming to the fore. And we will then invite questions from the audience. A brief introduction to eZdia. We are a content company trying to solve um, content problems for enterprises. We are not just about creating enriched and indexed content, but also managing the entire life cycle of content from creation to consumption. And our platform provides some very advanced capabilities to project manage this content with streamlined workflows and other custom configurations, which include several plugins, connectors with CMS systems and other softwares. So a little bit about what eZdia does, and I've already talked a little bit about it. We are an enterprise platform to support large volumes of content. We focus on e-commerce. We have a large workforce of more than 35,000 content experts across 140 countries who are currently helping us with different enterprise engagements. And we have new features coming up for our platform every quarter, and we are trying to do multiple things in suggestive and predictive intelligence, and also in like the marketplace, app marketplace, and also streamlining distribution of this content via integrations with several social plugins. We have advanced capabilities through our workflow to support content planning and collaboration, scheduling, and publishing. We have capabilities to process sophisticated content like images, videos, and other interactive content. You name it, we have it, kind of thing. So we will talk a bit more about our platform later when Ryan is talking about the different capabilities of our platform and explaining the best practices. And if you have any questions, please feel free to chime in. We'll be able to answer them at the end of this session. And if you want a demo, if you want to set up a demo to see how our platform works, just ping us at sales@eZdia.com and we will be able to set that up for you. So about the panelists, I've already talked to you about who we are. That's Ryan. He's the Director of User Experience here at eZdia. And that's me, Padmini. So Ryan has a law degree, but he currently manages the core experience of eZdia, which is basically, how the platform engages with the user. And he's very well versed with, different components of UI and UX, front end, product development, and he knows how to scale the workflow process in and out. He regularly quotes Steve Jobs saying, "I don't think anybody should be a lawyer, but going to a law school can actually be very useful because it teaches you how to think in a certain way." Padmini is a marketer. She loves to write and read about emerging technologies. She's successfully led marketing in various high growth companies like mobile, semiconductor, and now e-commerce. I'm going to talk about how enterprise content has changed in this hyper-connected economy and what we as marketers need to get ready for, right? So moving on here. So as a marketer, one of my biggest concerns has been the right content strategy for my business. And I know all of you guys will agree with me on that. But here at this point, I think it will be good to launch a poll and
Yeah, great.
sure, and understand about what your concerns are.
Okay, so we're going to launch this poll, and feel free to choose the best answer. All right, so we'll take maybe a minute or so to let the answers kind of trickle in and see how this works. But Padmini, if you want to, in the meantime, kind of continue on.
All right. So while you guys are taking the poll, I want to talk about some of the biggest concerns for marketers, and obviously having the right content strategy for your business comes to the fore. What kind of content is a marketing organization producing to create the right level of engagement, right? And it cannot be like a one-trick pony. So the production of content has to not only be engaging, but it also has to be very consistent. So if you look at this, there's a survey from Marketing Props around the primary area of need in B2B marketing, and producing engaging content definitely and has been the primary. But let's see what others are saying here.
Okay, so it looks like most of us, maybe 3/4 of us, have done the poll. So let's close it and see what the results are. All right. So that's good. I think we're skewed a little bit towards happy overall, moments of happiness. So that's good. No one is neither so happy or not so happy with their content process.
That's an interesting insight here. So I'm going back to the So the current state of enterprise content, and we already talked about, how the content needs to be. It's not just about creating consistent content, but it's a mixture of both consistency and engagement, right? So in my next slide, we have a few data points for us. So one of the data points is from B2B marketing, which talks about how producing engaging content ranks at the top. And then consistency is obviously the second. And this is a survey of marketers that has been conducted in 2014, all B2B marketers just like us, right? The other data point that we have here is from an analyst house, which says that content production today is lacking in a few ways. And one of the biggest is it fails to highlight how products and services are helping customers to become successful, right? And um, it is not proactive in the sense that it's not giving forward leaning insights. And that's where we talk about all the suggestive and predictive intelligence as well. And it's more focused on closing deals and not building relationships, right? So you see how the whole landscape of content is changing, but then there are some gaps that we are noticing. So the landscape of content, when I say it's changing, we're living in a very hyper connected world today, and there are different avenues and ways of consuming this content. So if you look at the Nielsen report from 2015, it talks about how the different channels of communications have expanded and how people are absorbing this content through different channels, right? So in the 1970s, for example, we had TVs and VCRs, and now we are at 2015 and we are talking about smart TVs, Chromecasts, and wearable devices. And who knows how the technology is going to look 5 years from now. IBM is already talking about cognitive computing. So when the customer is exposed to so many diverse channels and diverse way of consuming information, the content strategy needs to be aligned with the same effort, right? So another big trend that I want to highlight here is that there is an I cannot live without my phone syndrome, which is not just teenagers, it's all of us. Smartphones are an extension of us now. And you might have heard this before. There is an app for that. And there's a need for instant gratification and sharing, which is supported by social media now, right? So 80%, 87%, I'm sorry, of the folks who are surveyed here say that smartphone does not leave their side day or night. And it is to this generation that we are selling content. So you can see the drift of where I'm going here, right? This is what I call, or we call, the hyper-connected economy. A little bit of shifting gears here to e-commerce. And the reason we bring up e-commerce is because that's our primary vertical, and we are selling content and our platform to that vertical. The whole e-commerce scape has changed quite a bit now. People are buying, and they're buying online. We all know that. And every business has a presence up there. So here's a report from eMarketer, which talks about the growth of e-commerce in the US between 2011 and 2017. And you can see the growth numbers here. It's just exponential. And in 2017, we are seeing a growth of almost $434 billion in the market, right? So this basically is like there's a spike, obviously, by a whole lot. But if you look at m-commerce now, a more interesting statistic, there has been a growth from about 3 billion in 2011 to almost 71 billion in 2015, and we're looking to double that, right? So you see what I'm talking about and where the economy is growing and where it's going, right? And if you are a retailer who's trying to establish a presence or trying to understand this market, it is moving at light speed. And the whole paradigm of supporting content is shifting, and it's shifting to support the mobile space. And not just mobile, it's actually beyond mobile. It's going to be wearables, it's going to be, as IBM says, cognitive computing. It's just mind blowing, right? Now, what has this resulted in? So this has resulted in a proliferation of product commerce across the board. So we see a few marketplaces here, which have sprung up in the last 2 decades, and the seller's presence on these platforms has only spiked. You see the major ones I've listed here are Alibaba, Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, right? But this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have These are meaning that these are only 3 or 4 marketplaces. There are tons and tons of tier 2 and tier 3 ones coming up, and they are all over in all geos like US, Australia, UK, India. These countries are becoming the primary retail destinations. Now, going back to m-commerce a little bit and kind of tying this whole product commerce with m-commerce, um, there's a need for enterprises like us, retailers like us and you, to establish a mobile presence and establish conversions through that channel, right? The whole game is about driving engagement, it's about driving conversion, and it's about driving the context driven content, right? So the game here is slightly different when it comes to mobile because of the different form factors and the expectations of the platform, right? And the content on these platforms can be presented and optimized differently. And that's why you would hear the word mobile optimization, the phrase mobile optimization, a lot more. Is that time for another poll here, or should we go through this slide and then do another poll later?
Yeah, is this the end of the section for this?
Kind of, sort of, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's go to the next slide and we can jog the poll.
Okay. So as I was saying about the context driven enterprise, right? So there is this world is a lot more context driven, user driven, identity driven, right? And so to be able to drive content is a slightly different game here. And we still need to ensure the same things. We still need to ensure engagement. We still need to ensure conversations and closures to establish market presence. And that's the first part of this slide, and the other part is all about the ads that I'm showing here and how different ads are tailored for different social platforms. And you can see the orientation and the presence and the performance of these ads as very starkly different for each of these social platforms, right? So at this point, let's take another poll and then.
Okay, so for this poll, we want to see whether or not you think that e-commerce and content marketing will change dramatically over the next 5 years. We gave you a little bit of information around that. A lot of this information was from Mary Meeker's Internet Report that came out a couple months ago. And if you haven't had a chance to review that and you're in the e-commerce or content marketing space, go check that out. I think Casey, she works for a venture capital firm, and you can Google it. So we'll wait for the poll results to come back in a minute or two. All right, so about 60% of the people have voted. I'll leave it a few more seconds for anyone to finish up. Okay.
So let's close the poll here. And yeah, I mean, almost 70% of you think that there's no doubt in your mind that, content marketing is going to change over the next 5 years, right? And so you're absolutely right here. The way the market is going and the way we are seeing trends happening, this is just tip of the iceberg, and we are going to see only more changes going forward. And from our initial orientation here, I hope it's clear how complex this enterprise content system world can become, right? So let me go back to the next slide here, where we talk about the whole hyper-connected economy. And so when we talk about e-commerce and we talk about content, we are not working in a silo anymore, right? And as a content marketer for your e-commerce business, it's very important to understand the orientation of the different players who are there in this ecosystem and who you need to interact with, right? There are CMS platforms like Drupal, WordPress, Joomla. There are e-commerce platforms like Magento, Volusion, Shopify, BigCommerce, and you need to integrate with all these folks to create that experience that we just talked about. There are analytics and optimization platforms which are working like BrightEdge or SEOMOS or Searchmetrics or SpyFu, which are actually helping you to generate a lot of predictive and suggestive intelligence around what your buyer is looking for, right? There is all these social platforms that are at the top of the funnel where the user is interacting with and sharing content for instant gratification, right? There is marketing automation tools in the backend, which is able to help you to regulate all your marketing campaigns and drive the results that you really need to drive. And then there is this whole infrastructure of platforms and devices which you need to support, because there is Android, there is iOS, there is Windows. There's a lot more platforms within sub platforms or sub operating systems within these that you need to support. There are different types of telecom operators operating different geos, which support different kind of features. And then there is all this languages across the board, across different countries, right? Because you are a global retailer. So you understand that, to this whole distribution and consumption channel is diverse. The integration points are diverse. So what do you need to support this kind of ecosystem, and what kind of an agile strategy do you need to accommodate in your content, right? So that's where I would like to hand it over to Ryan, where he's going to talk about some of the best practices that we as eZdia think that you should imbibe in your content strategy. And we will also take you through some of the um, case in points here, where we talk about how we do things here at eZdia through our platform. And hopefully that's going to be a very interesting session.
Okay. Okay. So our basic thesis here is that e-commerce and content marketing is changing dramatically. And it's changing dramatically because of the proliferation of these huge social platforms. And each of these platforms are building in uh, a lot more features around e-commerce. So single click buy buttons on Pinterest, even Google, Facebook, and then some of the large chat applications like WeChat and Taibo are building e-commerce in directly into their systems. And so more and more people are moving to these platforms on a daily basis. So as someone that has built out an e-commerce company, how do you adapt to this new environment? It might not happen today, but how do we prepare ourselves for this new world order in 5 years? So let's talk about some of these principles. So the first principle that we'd like to talk about is flexibility. You have your internal CMS, and you want to create a system that is cloud-based. You want to be able to have internal and external teams be able to, anywhere in the world on any device, log in and see the state of your content. Making it cloud-based allows for that to happen. It allows teams to be together on one system and to work consistently across the content that you have, as more and more of this content is going to be distributed across platforms that you don't have full control over. It's also an unsiloed approach. So it kind of gathers all of your resources into one area and standardizes that across through these cloud-based platforms like Amazon Web Services, etc. You also want your CMS system to be modular. And what we mean by modular is we want you to think about your content in terms of chunks. So if it's an e-commerce company with tens of thousands of products that you're selling, break that product information into these kind of manageable chunks in terms of attributes, the content that is being written on top of the product information, social that's being generated as a result of you wanting to sell these products. Um, it makes things easier to digest and understandable, and it allows teams to work on modifying certain modules of this content without being burdened by the weight of all of this content together in a complex system. So on a similar line is that this idea of extensibility. You want to be able to work on manageable chunks that you can extend into a bunch of different areas. So for instance, if you have your product information and that product information needs to go to Google's product listing, it needs to go into Pinterest for their buy buttons, it needs to go into Facebook as a Facebook ad, or you want to build like SEM on top of that. If you know that one of your modular pieces, you can extend that into these different platforms, it's going to be much easier for you to do that. And it allows your teams to kind of do less with more. And because you've modularized and are able to extend these small chunks of content, then all the issues that you worked out when you first tackled this small chunk are solved. And so you don't have to duplicate this content and go through those same bugs and those same issues every single time you want to repurpose this content. And that can save an incredible amount of time. And then, of course, it's all this flexibility is in order for your teams to be able to do more with less. It allows a deeper collaboration between your teams because it's the content chunks are modularized and accessible by all of these other team members. And then they're able to extend that into their functional roles. So if you have an ads team, right? If your ads team knows that another team has modularized the product information, they can then leverage that information to create ads on top of that and extend that out through their channels. And in that way, it allows for teams with different objectives to be able to leverage a consistent cloud-based modular system. So, the way we as eZdia have done it for the last few years is we've tried to simplify that to such a degree that within a few keystrokes, you're able to get a list of all of the projects that your company is working on and have any team member anywhere in the world be able to access that content, understand that content, and then extend it for their purposes. So the second kind of big best practice or concept for us too is consistency. Consistency in an Agile framework is difficult because things are moving so quickly, and in a real-time environment with a lot of people working on content together, you tend to get inconsistent information and inconsistent data. And so one of the best practices is to focus on consistency in your content creation platform or process, excuse me. So one of those ways is through monitoring. You can do machine monitoring to identify gaps in your content. You can even compare certain content against one another to find out whether or not it's linguistically consistent. You can also use this monitoring to focus on certain areas. Maybe a specific category for you is not as fleshed out as other categories, and you've identified that if you're able to build out a certain category, then your ROI on that would be greater relative to other categories. So this kind of monitoring allows you to be able to get glanceable, actionable insight into your data. The second kind of concept within consistency is this idea of simple. John Maeda wrote a whole book on keeping things simple, and simple things are easy to digest and easy to understand. It keeps the moving parts to a minimal level so that when new team members or other processes come into play, that you're able to actually conceptualize the way your system works and be able to adapt it to whatever it is that has changed that has caused you to adapt. One of these is minimizing sort of your content templates. So if you have, say, an ad campaign or a social campaign, try to minimize the number of templates that that campaign uses. While in some way there's a lot of value to have content be extremely, like have different style guides for, say, Facebook versus Twitter versus Pinterest, there might be some value there, but think about the cost of having that complexity. And so sometimes simplifying down to every social post should be under 140 characters and within a sentence or two, aptly describe what it is that the customer or user will get value from. From that simplicity, you're able to scale your processes. Iterative. Obviously, an agile development or agile content process is very iterative. You at each stage, at each sprint, or at each project, you want to think intelligently about what it is you're trying to accomplish and about how those different pieces connect together in order for you to achieve your objectives. So don't be afraid of being iterative. If your content process is getting screwed up because of the need to change, then it's not because iteration itself is bad. It's that maybe your process needs to be a little more flexible and it needs to be a little more consistent, or it needs to be a little more simple so that when you do need to make changes, if, say, the Pinterest buy button comes out and you need to adapt to that, look inward on your system and figure out how easy it was to adapt to this change. And then, of course, with every one of these, it's team and collaboration. Waste is reduced with collaboration. At times, it might seem that excessive communication might cause certain things to move slower, but building from a base of information exposed to team members creates a more consistent and collaborative environment, in our opinion.
Okay. You want to give an example of this?
Yeah, so this is just like a quick dashboard on our system to kind of express this idea. And so we wanted to, at a glance, be able to give somebody a picture of a specific project or order. So this is just one of our pie charts that shows how many items for this project are in writing, how many are in quality assurance stage, how many are in keyword research, initial processing, or approved. What we want to be able to do is take a huge amount of information and distill it so that at a glance you're able to understand the state of any particular project or campaign. Okay, so our third best practice is around integration. And in our opinion, in terms of e-commerce and content marketing, integration is really where things are headed. We all want really small, efficient teams that can do a lot. And now with the proliferation of technology, our developers can do much more with much less. And so that means also that our content marketing and marketing teams also have to do a lot with very little. And so and you want to work iteratively. So you want to start small, right? So we don't want to build out a 5-person marketing team in order to test whether or not a specific channel is going to work for us. Some of the best way now to do that is you hire a third-party agency to help you with that initiative, or an ad agency, or some other vendor or partner to be able to kind of give you the information that you need and be able to test whether or not you can prove out the ROI. And that means that your content marketing team and your e-commerce team needs to integrate with all of these other sort of separate services and components. And so, for instance, with your team, you want to be able to, with that single sign-on, integrate external teams alongside your internal teams and your stakeholders. So because you're working on a consistent sort of unified like content warehouse essentially, you're able to then bring in your boss, your boss's boss, or even some of your contributors all into this process for them to perform their functions. Analytics. We all now want analytics brought in and integrated into our content marketing process, content creation process. But now analytics is a lot more broken up than it used to be, right? You used to just go, okay, I have Google Analytics, I incorporate it into my site, and that's what I got. Now there are a bunch of other people out there, a bunch of other companies that offer great analytical tools alongside their services. And so being able to integrate them easily into your content creation process becomes really important. We kind of talked about vendors and third parties. You want to be able to integrate them in so that you can kind of do more with your smaller team. And then developers here, I kind of add this. A lot of this is about using current software development processes and principles into your content creation process, because those principles can really help you scale and distribute your work and leverage your work in kind of a greater way. And on the developers front, some marketing teams are less development driven or less built functionally, where they have a front end developer or they have some development team there in order to accomplish the objectives. But you want to get buy-in from the developers early on and bringing them into and having them understand how your content creation process works will build empathy with your developers. And if they empathize with your approach, then you don't have to communicate to them as directly, and you don't have to build out strict product requirement docs as strictly, because they understand what your pain process is. And then on their free time and in an independent basis, they're able to build out solutions. And we've seen that works really well with our content marketing team, where we were able to kind of communicate the pain points, understand where we want to go, and then allow our front-end development team to build out solutions that they can then scale across their organization, across the marketing org, which for us is around, how big is our team now? Around 8 to 10
About
marketing
10.
teams in
Yeah.
2 countries.
Yeah.
So a bunch of different geographies that we have to account for.
Cool. You want to talk about the item summary?
Yeah. Oh, so this one, we have the ability to publish to third-party sites. We were integrated with WordPress, but I thought that this simple table kind of expressed a lot. Where in the beginning, in sort of best practice number 1, you're able to get all your projects at a glance with a couple keystrokes. In this way, you're able to see what is assigned to you. So this is a contributor or a vendor. You're able to log in and kind of see like, okay, these are all the things that are assigned to me, and all the items that I have to work on for our eZdia projects. So it integrates a lot of these elements in there. It's kind of analytics. It's kind of pulls in all of the tasks related to this project. It has both the eZdia internal project as well as a community blog. So it kind of incorporates a lot of these elements in here.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So I think, he's already shown you some screenshots, but if you would like to see how all of this works in its, entirety holistically, ping us at sales@eZdia.com, and we should be able to set up a demo for you, or have like a link sent out to you where you can play around and see how these various elements work.
Yeah, and I'm happy if you guys want to ping me with any questions. My email address is ryan.w@eZdia.com. And feel free to ping me with if you have any follow-up to anything I mentioned or want to know more. There's a bunch of resources that I have outside of this slideshow.
Yeah, and same here. So, if you guys want to talk to me about your content marketing initiatives, ping me at padmini.m@eZdia.com. And Ryan mentioned the Merrymakers report, but if you guys want to access that, we can definitely send it out to you so that you get more perspective on where we are with e-commerce and content and all of that.
Okay. So we have one last poll.
So we have, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this poll is about the 3 best practices. If that's what's needed. And I think after this poll, we'll move to questions. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, about almost half of the results have come in, and they are very heavily skewed
towards integrations, which we also see as one of the biggest pain points now, right? With our customers.
Yeah.
We've been seeing a lot of that. So.
Yeah, and it's also one of the hardest to build solutions around because not everybody is API driven
Right.
and has easy connection points to their system. So we find a lot of people still using email, a lot of people using third-party systems like Basecamp or even eZdia, just as a means to communicate between internal and external teams.
Yeah, and I think that's where the whole aspect of having a platform or a unified interface which will help you to do this come about, right?
Yeah. And I, from my experience too, it's e-commerce content management systems grew out of a very specific environment.
Right.
And now that these internal systems are having to adapt and be stretched to the point of breaking, and one of those is to just use a third-party tool in order to.
Yeah. And talk to us. We've got the solutions for you.
Okay, so we'll give it another 20 seconds. Okay, so about 2/3 of the votes came in, and I'll share the results. So yeah, again, we're skewed downward towards integrations, which is interesting. That is interesting. So a lot of people think that their system is relatively flexible and consistent, and integrations is really
where they need some help.
Really where the help is needed. Great, that's really helpful for us too as we start to build out more solutions for our customers.
Great, thank you guys. So at this point, we would like to open the floor up to you guys. So if you have any questions, we will be happy to answer. And if we have to refer the questions out to our specialists, we will take a note and get back to you later. No questions yet?
Yeah, so we'll stay on for the next few minutes just to answer any questions, but that'll conclude the webinar. So you guys can drop off if you don't have any questions, and feel free to email us with any questions that you might have.
Yeah, and thank you for attending this session today. And as I mentioned, we will be posting a recording of this session on our website and on our channel. So stay tuned for that. So one of the questions that came up was, what do you guys suggest when it comes to ramping large-scale content projects? And um, the person here is talking about like 2000 or so product descriptions, etc. And so,
You want me to jump in?
Yeah, you can take it.
Yeah, so 2,000 product descriptions is a good start to really get some analytics back around whether or not that objective was valuable. So we usually start by creating a project, incorporating those 2,000 product descriptions into the system, and then bringing the team members on board so that you can all kind of get an idea of the way you can collaborate around this. And then from there, we build out a kind of initial style guide and start to get an idea around how these product descriptions could be built. And then we kind of go back and forth on that for a week or so, 2 weeks, up to 2 weeks. And then, we kind of communicate some of our best practices and some of our suggestions, and take your suggestions as well to kind of build this out. And then we do kind of a staged process where we'll do an initial set quickly to get those items back and reviewed for the customer, and then from there we scale. So at eZdia, we have a bunch of external writing teams that we leverage. So getting the writing done is not necessarily a big issue. It's getting us all on the same page in terms of what's required. And we have internal tools that we use to do that.
And here's where the beauty of the platform comes in, right? Where we kind of use the whole speedy onboarding. And then we also have workflows, complex workflows that we can set up between different editors and writers and keyword researchers. And a lot of that can be automated to some extent. There's also a lot of capability from the SEO side that we bring through indexing and create the enrichment of content. And a lot of that can be done in a very automated fashion where there's not a lot of involvement manually of content writers, etc. Right, like negative filters and all of that stuff to clean up all the product descriptions to make sure that it's all flushed out and ready to launch.
Yeah, that's where modularity comes in, because you can then apply these other techniques to this content.
Right.
So we have another question around what should you be doing when you're not sure about the longevity of a certain content type? Whether whatever content is working for you often doesn't after 6 months. Usually it gets very expensive.
Yeah, so I think here's where the fail fast approach comes in, where you don't get into a situation where you're working with a certain type of content for a long time. Just test it out like a pilot and ensure that you're either converting or not. I know that there are shades of gray, but here there's like a very black and white rule. When your content is not working, it's not working. So you need to, and that's where a lot of intelligence systems comes in, where platforms like us are building like a lot of suggestive and predictive intelligence around what type of content resonates really in the market. And when you actually buy the platform and you implement it, you would see that you can track a lot of user behavior and where they are going and what they are doing with different types of retail platforms, right? And so based on that, you can actually tweak your content strategy. That would be my advice, but I don't know what you would say.
Yeah, that's good advice. The input that I would have too is around looking at your content in an evergreen way.
Yeah.
And that's based on experience in having to go through this first time around, where after 6 months you realize that you built in content that doesn't last the stand of time.
That's right.
So you have put dates, you've referenced seasons, time periods, major events. And so what I would suggest, and it depends on the circumstances, is that a large chunk of this content, maybe 75 to 90%, you're going to be able to make as evergreen content. And then a small portion of it is the content that might need to be tailored to a very specific time and place. And you can, so that means you can kind of abstract out the contextual stuff so that you can then focus on the time and place stuff in a small portion.
Yeah.
This reminds me too that we are building a solution now where you're able to do multivariate content. So that means if you have a product description that is in 10 different colors and 5 different sizes, you're able to essentially write this content once, and it's able to adapt to those 10 different sizes and the attributes related to that product in order to build out 50 different unique product descriptions. Right. And so I see with this question there might be a way to do something like that where the multivariate is based on a time and a place. Yeah, and so you can build out this content temporally there, right, but then be able to adapt it to different times and places.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we have one last question. Could you give some idea about futuristic content, i.e., whether things are moving more towards images, interactive images, etc.? Yeah, so that's a good one.
Yeah. So absolutely, yes. It is moving towards in more interactivity, and it's not just about the content itself. It's also about where people are accessing this content, right? So today it's actually on a phone. Tomorrow it's going to be on a wearable device, and who knows where it's going to be next, right? So the whole complexion of content, the way people are actually accessing it is differing, and also the types of content that people are accessing is differing, right? So yes, we are definitely seeing a lot of demand for interactive content from different marketplaces, especially with interactive images, videos. For example, people are becoming very visual. They don't want to read a lot of text. The attention span is decreasing, right? They want to be able to get a 10-second download, right? So that's where we are seeing the market head. Ryan can add more details from what he's seeing from having, deployed this platform from a user experience perspective.
Yeah. So as a designer, I think about how the form factor of the phone and the context of how a user uses the phone and when and where has started to dictate how content is adapting in order to engage that user. So when you're on your phone, you kind of, whether you're waiting in line or you're at a stop light, even though you shouldn't, you kind of quickly glance at your phone and you have this split second.
Yeah.
You type something into a search bar, or you go to Facebook, or you go to Pinterest, and you're scanning, right? You're like flipping down and up. So visual content is much more valuable in that regard, in that it's able to communicate a lot very shortly. I notice, like with my own behaviors, when I'm going to buy something, I don't want to read a product description because I know that that product description is going to be the same across every single site that I go to.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to see a quick image of it to see whether or not it represents what it is that I'm trying to buy. And then if it does, I'll jump to the platform that I go to buy it from. Yeah. So I'll go to Amazon or I'll go to Google Shopping Express. And that presents, like, that idea presents a huge problem for e-commerce companies because the traditional approach has been buy it on our platform or become a marketplace on all of these different places. And that's why your content strategy kind of needs to adapt, because the buyer wants to buy it with the person that they trust.
Right.
So Instacart or Postmates or Amazon or Google Shopping Express. You might get that visitor hit on your site and read your product description, but they're not going to buy it from there because they haven't entered in their credit card information.
Yeah. So there's a whole paradigm shift, basically, in the way people are consuming.
So long story short, your content has to change to be more visual, to be shorter, to be more digestible, and in such a way as you can distribute it to these places where people are going to start buying.
Right. Exactly.